Welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most urgent topics in the never-dull world of Indiana basketball. This is our 122nd edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 514th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, May 16th, 2019. I am your host, Jared Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred on Wednesday when I opened my email and found the latest newsletter from Dribble Handoff, an analytics website geared toward coaches that I highly recommend if you want to understand college hoops at a deeper level. This edition of the newsletter came with the subject line, "Is defense undervalued?" The author, Frank DeHel, believes that it is. And for an Indiana program that is clearly building its identity on the defensive end of the court, that is an intriguing assessment. After highlighting some compelling data to back its main point, the email says, quote, "Coaches are undervaluing defensive abilities, and therefore teams aren't playing their most efficient lineups. Coaches are just playing their most efficient offensive players, without consideration for their defensive value. Undervaluing defense affects all aspects of the game. Teams who properly value defense not only are rewarded by an increased scoring margin over the course of the season, but also find additional value from a player acquisition perspective. Valuing defense appropriately should completely alter recruiting and the transfer market," unquote. The email concludes, quote, "Regardless of the root cause, defense continues to be undervalued. The game is being managed at a suboptimal level. This large-scale market inefficiency offers tremendous returns for teams willing to invest in analytically studying defensive possessions," unquote. Well, Archie Miller certainly seems to be a coach who is focused on doing exactly that. Now look, let me state for the record, this market inefficiency of an undervaluation of defense as described in this email does not mean that offensive firepower isn't vitally important. It is. Anyone who has watched the last 2 years of IU basketball understands that. But it does suggest that in the long run, given current college basketball trends, Archie's insistence on building an IU program that values defense will bear fruit. And if this season's national championship matchup between Virginia and Texas Tech was any indication, it will be fruit that one day might taste pretty sweet. Okay, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he is the Tyrion Lannister of Girls U Sports Coaching in Cincinnati, the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and one of the world's most respected bracketologists. He is Andy Bottoms.
What a swell guy.
Andy, what is your Bottoms line from the last week in Indiana basketball?
Well, I think by the time we recorded last week, we knew about Ethan Morton, and we also had reason to believe that Quinones was going to go to Memphis, and that's really how things played out. So at this point, for me, it's really a bit of a waiting game in terms of seeing what IU is going to do with those two open scholarships. As we discussed last week, I don't really foresee a scenario where they would use both of them, but I do think it would be intriguing to see if they can find a grad transfer or even a sit-out transfer to use one of those on as they continue to build. But what I like is that there doesn't appear to be a rush to give those out and use those up as it feels like there has been in prior years. And so I think that's comforting to see that at least while the coaching staff, I'm sure, is disappointed in a couple of the misses on the recruiting trail, I think it also shows that they aren't panicking and feel pretty comfortable with the guys that are there. So I do think it places a bit more emphasis on Jerome Hunter's health, which we still don't really have a great view into. But I do think it's an intriguing roster at this point, one that is very balanced, and you could see every guy potentially contributing in a path to minutes for everyone, but no clear superstar as there seems to have been over the last handful of seasons. So it's shaping up to be an interesting one. I don't think at this point I'm ready to say that the roster is completely set in stone, because as different colleges graduate and guys may become eligible to be grad transfers, maybe there's some different movement. You had late coaching movement this week that we'll talk about later, and so I don't think everything is nailed down by any means, but it's interesting to watch, and like I said, glad to see there isn't a lot of panic setting in from the coaching staff standpoint, but also just kind of curious to see if this is truly what the roster will look like going into next season.
And to my right, he is a senior writer at the Big Lead, a proud Indiana Journalism School graduate, and he is a man so impressed with his own intelligence that he would pick himself to win a one-on-one Westeros history trivia battle against Bran Stark.
Time has proven me right on virtually everything.
He is Ryan Phillips. Ryan, what is your rant this week?
I am a history nerd, so yeah, I'd kick Bran's tail. I like
Especially
how you
since he's nowhere to be seen now.
I know. I like how you went Game of Thrones heavy this week.
It's the last week, man.
You guys want to talk about that? Let's just talk about that.
Segment 2, all thrones.
I made it. I'm gonna zone out. Then I made it clear a couple weeks ago that I've never watched one episode and know really nothing that anyone's talking about. So
Jared,
that'll be riveting.
If you could take Dragonfire to one tormentor of Indiana over the years, who would it be? You could light them up like Lord Varys. Who would it be?
Mackie Arena, get it out of here.
Mackie Arena. All right, I can see that. Okay,
I respect it, but
if people in the comments want to respond, feel free or hit us up on Twitter. Not a whole lot went on this week. Lost Quinones to Memphis. I think everyone expected that. They made a good late run. I think they did everything they could there. That was a tough one because I think he fit what they needed. He wasn't a great defender, but he was a great shooter, and they really need that. I don't know how Memphis is going to fit all these players in, and it's kind of weird what's going on down there right now. I think some people are questioning whether it's all legitimate, but I mean, Penny Hardaway, clearly a magnetic personality. He used to have a mini version of himself selling shoes. So, I mean, how can he pass that up? Voiced by Chris Rock, actually.
It's about money.
Yeah, I don't know why you would suggest such a thing, Jared. Bags
of cash.
But yeah, just sort of a typical a week of off-season Indiana basketball. Would love to see something happen to add another roster player or get some word on Jerome Hunter's health. I think that's really all we're looking at right now. The UConn news came out, which I know we're going to talk about soon, the John Beilein news, but that's stuff we're going to get to. As far as just overall what happened the week in Indiana basketball, though, kind of a slow thing. They've got that dunk. You can tell how slow it is by the fact that the Twitter account is doing a bracket for dunks, and Marco Killingsworth lost. So clearly whoever's running that and whoever's voting has no idea what they're doing.
Well, maybe we'll break that down next week when we get the final results in. All right, here's what we're going to talk about this week. A few Hoosier college hoops headlines, as Ryan alluded to. Then we'll take a glance around the Big Ten for both next year and beyond, and then we will answer your questions, as we always do. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. Now, real quick, before we get to the headlines, one thing, Ryan, we haven't been on a show together in a while. You have seen this clip because I posted it on Twitter, but we haven't gotten your official podcast response to Ethan Happ's response to your constant ripping of him. So I'm going to play that right here and then give you a chance to respond. This is Ethan Happ. I sent him a message. This was on Cameo. Asked him to respond to my co-host Ryan.
You don't have to explain it. You can just say Ethan Happ called into the show, but
okay, fine.
Giving it away. It's
fine. Well, I just wanted to be transparent with how this goes. Anyway, here's a quote from Ethan Happ. Then Ryan, you can respond.
What's up, Ryan? Ethan here. I heard that you were a hater towards my post moves throughout my career at Wisconsin. I know that you think I traveled on basically all my possessions in the post. But I'm here to tell you that I stopped doing it. I don't do it anymore. And I'm sorry to break the bad news, but that's not the case. The refs would have called it.
He knows Big Ten officials, right? That he played in the league for 4 years. He understands that they're quite good at missing things. No, you know what? Kudos to Ethan Happ for responding and being classy about it and everything. He did cut down on the travels as he got older, but I still contend when he catches the ball, he drags his foot every time. He'll get away with it plenty at the next level, so I guess he doesn't have to worry about it. But Ethan, don't make me like Ethan Happ, Jared. You're a jerk.
I mean, he did kind of tacitly admit that he did it, especially in the beginning. So he kind of agreed with you, but then kind of went against you.
Yeah, no, he definitely did as a freshman. There's no question about that. But I thought he continued to do it throughout his career. I thought he cleaned it up a little bit as he got older, but hats off to Ethan Happ for being classy in his response. Ugh.
Yeah. All right, let's talk some headlines here. Ryan, as you mentioned earlier, we did get news that Indiana will play UConn in the Jimmy V Classic on December 19th. Texas Tech and Louisville are also in that event. I know there were some reports when it was announced that Indiana would play in this that it was going to be Indiana-Louisville, but it turns out that it's going to be Indiana playing UConn. The Huskies were 16-17 last season, the first season under new coach Dan Hurley. They do have 3 top 100 recruits coming in. One that astute IU fans will be familiar with, James Bouknight, who Indiana was after, then also Jalen Gaffney and Akuk. So they do have an infusion of talent. Andy, your thoughts on Indiana? This is probably the least sexy matchup, I suppose, of the 3 that Indiana could have gotten, but maybe just looking at it on paper, the most winnable.
Yeah, and I think that's what we talked about this. I don't remember if it was last week or the week prior where it was announced that IU was playing in the event, and that was, I think, the consensus that we came to, which was maybe the matchup that you like the least, but from a winnable game standpoint, I would place it above Louisville based on who they have coming back, and Texas Tech based on the recent track record. So in that regard, potentially not too bad. I was just kind of glancing down UConn's roster. They didn't lose a ton from last year. They did lose Jalen Adams, who is their leading scorer. But other than that, they have, it looks like 5 other guys who scored at least 8 points a game, all of whom appear to be back and not within the transfer portal. So, but it was very much rebuilding year is probably not the right way to say it, but a challenging year for them last year with it being Dan Hurley's first season. So I think you'll see him, build things up a bit there. They had been on the downswing under Kevin Ollie for the last couple years prior to that. So they haven't had a winning season since back in 2016. So I think they're a program headed in the right direction, but one that from a beatable standpoint was probably as good as IU could draw in this particular event.
Yeah, so now we know that Indiana will play Arkansas at home. This game against UConn, they'll play Notre Dame in the Crossroads Classic. They'll have one other, guaranteed game against a big conference team in the Big Ten ACC Challenge, and then it'll be interesting to see how they fill in the schedule around there. So we'll have plenty more to talk about once those games start to get filled in. Ryan, I was intrigued this week. The NCAA Rules Committee has proposed moving the three-point line back to the international distance. So from 20 feet 9 inches where it is now to 22 feet 1 3/4 inches. That's where the line was during the NIT, which of course Indiana played 3 games in this year. For what it's worth, Indiana's returning players shot 31% from the longer three-point line in the NIT. They're also talking about possibly resetting the shot clock to 20 seconds after an offensive rebound, and then a few others. What are your thoughts on this? I like the longer three-point line. I hope they do it.
Yeah, and for people who are wondering about the percentages will go down, whatever, guys will adjust. They'll get used to shooting it from longer. They got used to shooting it where it is now. I mean, for a long time, guys didn't shoot threes barely at all, and they train themselves and get used to it. And now you see guys like Steph Curry and Damian Lillard pulling up from 35 feet out. I mean, the game evolves and catches up with the rules.
But the immediate effect is probably some guys will shoot less, and it should open up the court some.
Agreed. And it will also open up the spacing of the floor, because the three-point line will be pushed out for, the offenses will start from further out. And that will open up cuts. It will open up, backdoor cuts and things like that, and should spread the floor. And I think that if you do that, there has to be a discussion made about maybe making the court a little bit wider, in certain arenas, because they just have to be inside a certain, dimension. I think that they might need to open up the court a little bit. That's been discussed at the NBA level before, because guys are getting so much bigger and stronger and there's just not enough room on the court. Maybe you expand the distance between the 3-point line and the sidelines a little bit, or lengthen the court a little bit. I also think that I completely agree with the shot clock rule of resetting it to 20. They're already doing that in the NBA. I don't know. At NBA, I think it resets to 14. But I like that a lot. And I think it's, if you have a really good offensive rebounding team, you get a benefit from that now because it resets. But also when it's unless you're going to reduce the shot clock to 24, 25 or something like that, I think you do need to bring the reset down, because a team gets an offensive rebound, it can kill a minute of clock completely if it takes it all the way down to 1, gets the offensive rebound. You can kill an entire minute on one half of the floor. And while I get it, if you're a good offensive rebounding team, that's a benefit to you. I do think it bogs the game down a little bit. So I would like to see the reset of the shot clock, create some more urgency off of offensive rebounds instead of going out, setting up your entire offense all over again and all that. I'd like to see some secondary offense off offensive rebounds and some more. I think it would lead to more attacking the rim.
Agreed. Andy?
Yeah, only things I would add. I liked most of the rules they tried out in the NIT. I'd really like to see them adapt the resetting the fouls or playing quarters or something like that. I think that to me really helped the game flow and some of the free throw shooting situations. From a 3-pointer on those, so few guys are really that close to the line anymore. It seems like, Ryan, as you said, that I'm not sure it's a huge adjustment, although I think I speak for all IU fans when I say that I don't think the 3-point shot after the last couple of seasons need to be made more difficult by pushing the line further away.
Well, you're also making it harder for everyone else, though. That's the benefit to IU.
No, I understood, but assuming that the discrepancy is still relative, it does not help at all. But
Devontae is going to take half our threes next year anyway, and he doesn't care where the line is. So I think we're positioned okay to handle it.
I will say, I think that the shot clock will be as consequential as moving the 3-point line back. I really don't think people understand how that speeds you up, because if you rebound it and it resets to 20, by the time you're getting out of your hands, maybe it's 18. By the time you decide what to do with the ball, it's 15, 14, 13. It's going to speed up the way the offenses are played. And I think it's going to be great for the basketball. And I thought it did in the NIT. I really liked the speed of the games and the pace of the games in the NIT. I'm not necessarily an advocate of splitting the game up into quarters as a lot of people are. I'm not against it. I'm just not like super pro splitting the game up into quarters, but I thought that the shot clock made the game move even more than that would.
Yep. Last headline I want to hit, and this will lead us into our discussion for segment 2. John Beilein leaves Michigan, goes to Cleveland. I want to get your guys' initial reaction to it, kind of from an Indiana perspective, because that's what matters for this podcast. Like,
first of all,
okay, what?
I was just going to say, how shocked were you? Scale of 1 to 10.
When I immediately saw it, shocked. When you sit back and think about it and remember his dalliance with Detroit last year, I wasn't as shocked. But in the moment, I was shocked.
I'd completely forgotten about the Pistons thing.
Yeah.
I was. You could put me on a 10 for shocked. With how good he's been and with his age, I didn't think he'd want to move on. He's not like a young guy who can always come back, to call. This is probably the last move of his career. He's 66.
His final challenge.
And look, good for him. And he's been a very innovative coach. I think we all think he's a top 5 college coach. Certainly, probably right now, maybe the top in the Big Ten. Shocked me that he would choose now to go. Like, if it had been after West Virginia and like 2 years at Michigan or something, wouldn't have surprised me. But at 66 years old, to be coaching 82 games like that, I did not.
At least he doesn't have to recruit anymore.
I was going to say there's trade-offs to all that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, college is a 365, 24/7 thing, but you can also push recruiting on the younger staff members and things like that. He's going to be out on the court 82 times a year, flying all over the place, and it's different, man. It's a different world. There's no easy basketball. I think that pro football is probably easier than college football because of the recruiting aspect. But pro basketball, you're on the road a lot, you're flying a lot, all that stuff. I wish him luck. I always thought he was a good man. I've interviewed him a few times. Saw him out in Maui last year.
Maui name drop.
Yeah, couldn't have been nicer. Couldn't have been more accommodating. Kind of a weird guy in a positive way, not like a creepy weird, but kind of a weird, odd guy. And forever he gave us Max Bielfeldt. So thank you, Coach Beilein. Wish you luck.
In case you were waiting, Coach, you have Ryan's blessing. So all is well as you make your way to Cleveland. So, Andy, when you see something like this, do you look at it as, okay, good, one of the best coaches is out of here, Michigan should fall down, that should allow Indiana to move up one spot in the pecking order? Or do you look at it as, man, I like when the Big Ten is rolling with as many good coaches as possible, and I want Indiana to rise because we're firing as well as we can, not just because other programs maybe take a step back? Because I'm more the latter. I'm disappointed. I like seeing as many good coaches in the Big Ten as possible.
There probably would have been times that I would have fallen on your side of it, but I think lately, I think from an IU perspective, take all the help we can get, and and go from there. But I was, and some of that is you don't really know how much that changes until you see who they bring in. If they're able to find somebody who can kind of continue what they had already, I think it becomes a little bit, it might become a little bit different equation versus if you see somebody who comes in is really going to employ a different system, change a lot of things around. I think you could see a step back in the short term for something like that. So I guess I view it right now more as the former and hey, good, this probably helps IU in the short term. But definitely was always a guy that I had a lot of respect for. Was a really smart, intelligent, offensive mind in particular, and like the way that he was able to, acknowledge that he needed some help getting things where they needed to be on the defensive end, and how much they've jumped over the last couple of seasons. And the flip side is you can kind of see with who they were going to lose this year. Do you really know? Is that a little bit harder to sustain? Who's to say? Maybe the timing was just right. There's never going to be a great time when you get to be that age to go and try it out. The timing in terms of after the NBA season, just it being far enough after Cleveland was done playing, that was the part that was a little bit more surprising to me, was just the actual timing of it, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, coming up here on the Assembly Call, we are going to take a look around the Big Ten. Who is set up the best for success next season? What does Michigan look like? And which programs do we have the most confidence in over the next 5 years? And where is Indiana in that hierarchy? We will discuss that. Stick with us. All right. And cut. Break. Nice long intro segment. Nice to be back. Good to see you, fellas. 21-13. It's a good healthy segment right there.
What were we going to talk about in between?
The grad transfer rules.
Oh, okay. Hey, by the way, also, if you guys have it, if you're Game of Thrones fans, go to the Big Lead. We did a game.
That's funny.
We did, yeah, and everybody's reacting to it. All the people in it. So we did a sports media personalities as Game of Thrones characters, and we kind of been planning it for a while. I didn't write any of it. I got to give credit to the other guys, but we all kind of discussed who was who and worked it out, and everybody is reacting to it. And Stephen A. Smith has reacted to his picture on his Instagram.
Rachel Nichols reacted.
She did. She was a big fan.
Full disclosure, when I saw you tweet that out, I was like, this is going to be dumb. I'm not looking at this. This is trying to capitalize on Game of Thrones stuff. And then I saw Rachel Nichols retweet it, and I was like, huh. And I looked at it. It is funny. Like, it's really well done.
The pictures are what made it. I mean, let's be honest.
When I scrolled down and got to Cersei Lannister, I just burst out laughing.
Yeah.
I don't want to give that one away, but it's
perfect.
Funny. Andy, come back to the conversation, man. I know it's Game of Thrones. But
kudos to the photo guys in our office who did that. It is really fantastic. So go check that out. I got to give credit to those guys, and they need to get some eyes on that. It's been doing well, but thanks to everybody retweeting. I mean, everybody who's involved has said almost to a man has said something. Man and woman has said something. Wasn't gonna say, but yeah, the grad transfer rules. There's been some stories floating around that it's harder to get into IU as a grad transfer than anywhere else. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't know what you've been hearing, Jared.
Well, I have been hearing that is not necessarily true. I reached out to some people at the university and haven't heard back. Just trying to figure out like what is real.
The process.
Like can you actually explain, is it really harder? Because, if it is, that would explain, maybe why Indiana hasn't seemed as active in the grad transfer market. But I mean, we've gotten grad transfers in before, so I don't know the details on that, and people have been asking me, so I'm trying to find out. But
yeah, the only thing we were talking about before the show was that it has to be in a program that is not offered at their private school.
That's globally for the rule, right?
That's true.
Okay.
Everywhere, yeah. So
it's not just IU.
If you graduate and you want to transfer somebody somewhere else, it has to be somewhere that has a graduate program not offered. And you have to be going for that program, obviously. You have to be going for a program that is not offered at your current school. So a lot of people who grad transfer into IU, grad transfer into the Kelly School, because the Kelly School is obviously a great school, but at the same time, the Graduate Business School offers all kinds of different business classes that aren't necessarily offered at other grad schools. So I think that's, and of course as we all know, the Kelly School is really, the big Graduate Business School is really tough to get into. I don't know if this is really a thing or not, but it has been floating around there that it is.
Yeah. anyway, we're going to try and separate fact from fiction, and we'll report back when we can.
Yep.
So segment 2, let's start out talking Big Ten for next season. I kind of grouped them into some tiers, and I'll just lead this off with my tiers, and then you guys can kind of pick those apart and tell me where I'm wrong. I figure that'll kind of seed the discussion.
Made a few notes on
Sure.
And then I figured we'll close it. I thought it'd be fun to just peer out into the next 5 seasons. What programs do you have the most confidence in? Like if I said you have to bet $1,000 on who's going to win the most conference games over the next 5 years, and we can kind of go down the list and let's see where we think Indiana fits.
Okay,
into that.
before the Beeline move, would you guys have said Michigan?
I would have said Michigan number 2.
Who would you put in number 1?
Michigan State.
Okay.
Izzo's not leaving for the next 5 years.
No, I agree. I'm just curious.
That's like if you went out 10 years, it might change.
I was wondering if you would have put Beeline over Izzo for conference wins in the next 5 years. That's what I was asking.
No, and okay, maybe conference wins isn't the right way to frame it. I mean, basically, I just what's the best way to say like best program? It's not. It's.
I don't know.
I just like to frame it with some kind of stakes to make the conversation interesting. I don't know if that's the best way.
I think conference wins works. I mean, if you win the conference title,
because chances are the team with the most conference wins will probably win the most conference titles and do the best in the tournament, in the NCAA tournament. So
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
yeah, odds are yes.
okay, no need to overthink it.
Yeah.
All right,
Once they go to a 26-game Big Ten schedule, it'll be true round robin. It'll be clear that
God,
who's the
that'll be
best anyway.
glorious. That'll be great. Okay. Let's do this. You guys ready? Here we go.
This is Ethan Happ, and I never listen to the assembly call, especially the episodes that Ryan is on.
Thank you, Ethan. All right, welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to participate in our unedited live broadcasts or watch those replays, then check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. Ethan Happ will haunt you on this show, Ryan.
Stop giving that guy money.
I know, seriously. What are you doing?
That's it. That's all from Ethan Happ.
There aren't IU players you can get to make fun of me. Come on.
Don't worry. We got some more IU players coming. It's all happened. Okay, so we just in our last segment we talked about John Beilein leaving. Obviously, that kind of throws a huge wrench into the Big Ten as you project forward for next year. Michigan seemed like a program that was going to be in a little bit of a transition anyway, with Jordan Poole and Ignas Brazdeikis probably going to the NBA. Poole for sure. Brazdeikis says he's looking like he's probably going to stay in the draft. Charles Matthews leaving, but now Beilein is gone. So as we look at the conference for the next season, I kind of, put the teams into tiers based on, just what we've seen the last couple of years, who they have coming back. Let me give you my tiers, and then you guys pick them apart and tell me where I'm wrong. All right? Michigan State is the clear favorite, no question. They've got Izzo, Cassius Winston's back. They've got a great recruiting class. They will be the prohibitive favorite heading into next season. Kind of the next group that I guess have the most confidence in, just based on that recent track record and who they have coming back, I put Maryland, Iowa, Ohio State, and Purdue. Now, we're waiting on some decisions there as well. Weiss can't put his name in the NBA draft. I'm pretty sure he's coming back. Caleb Wesson probably coming back. But I put those guys in the next group. The question marks I had were Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Minnesota. Minnesota's waiting to hear on Amir Coffey. Teams that I feel like could kind of go either way, but I don't really know what to expect from them. Then teams that should be better than they were this year, Illinois, Penn State, and Rutgers, who have a lot of guys back, and those teams all played well in the second half of the season. And then the bottom feeders for next year, Nebraska and Northwestern. Northwestern that just doesn't really have a whole lot of hope moving forward. Nebraska, I think, has a lot of hope moving forward, as we'll get to, because I think Fred Hoiberg is going to do a good job there. But his first season at Iowa State, they were 3-13 in the conference with a lot of transfers. I feel like he'll probably have a similar transition this year.
There's going to be a change over there for sure.
Yeah. They basically turned over their entire roster with maybe a couple guys as exception. I think Isaiah Roby has his name in the draft. If he doesn't come back, like they've basically lost everybody who played any meaningful minutes.
Yeah, so I think they'll be good in the future, but that's where I think they are right now. So as we look just at next year, what do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Out of those, Andy, why don't you go first?
The Michigan State part is the easy part, I guess. I think Maryland, the kind of next group you have, I would absolutely agree with Ohio State. I think Purdue, from a track record standpoint over the last few years, as much as everybody's going to hate to admit it, is positioned pretty well, where they seem to have kind of another set of guys ready to step into bigger roles.
That's basically Faith and Painter right there. It really is,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, Maryland, certainly losing Bruno Fernando is a big deal. Assuming Anthony Cowan comes back, though, I think you have him, Jalen Smith, and the young wing players that they had last year. I think that one makes sense. If there was a team I was going to argue with in that tier, it would probably be Iowa. They ended up only 10-10 in the league last year. I think they started so much better, and so it may have seemed better than it really was, and really down the stretch faltered again. And you have most of the same guys back, minus Jared Cook, minus Nicholas Baer, minus Isaiah Moss. So I think they could take a little bit of more of a step back than it might seem. But I agree that from a talent standpoint, it doesn't completely fall off. But that's probably, of that tier, the one that I would nitpick. So I'll let Ryan jump in before we get into anybody else. But those are at least kind of your top five. That's the one I would nitpick.
Yeah, I would take Iowa out of that group as well. Purdue, I guess it is. It's the faith in Matt Painter, even though they're losing Carson Edwards, who I think is the engine that drives that entire team. You're losing Ryan Klein, a guy who just would come in and make murderous shots for you. I think that Purdue is a candidate to take a step back, but they were a candidate to take a step back this year. Carson Edwards turned into, an All-American type guy, and I think that was able to help sustain them. I don't love their roster coming back, but given their track record, it seems like somebody's going to step up and be way better than we expect them to. Just, so I get why you have them in that group. I also hate Purdue, so maybe that's why I'm thinking that. But
I didn't want to put them in that group.
Yeah, I know. I agree. Michigan State, you're right, is the easy part. I would have put Michigan maybe in the question marks or next group category, but without John Beeline, who knows what's going to happen? Do they go out and hire a new full-time coach, or do they, since it's so late in the process, do they go just promote someone for a year and then go find a head coach? It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. It really is with Michigan. And if they get a new person in, is there a transition? Is there turnover? Is there a big change of roster guys and all that stuff, recruits and all that? Minnesota, I think we're starting to see that Minnesota is a talented, they can consistently have talented guys on the roster, but how often are they going to put it together and be consistent under Pitino? I don't have faith in that happening. As for Indiana,
and no Jordan Murphy for them anymore. To kind of hold things together.
Yeah, and McBrayer not there either. I mean, I think if Amir Coffey doesn't come back, they take a big step back. I think they're taking a step back regardless, just because I'm not convinced that he's all that good of a coach. And you really, at that point, have a couple big guys, but Curry's pretty long in the tooth and injury prone at this point, it feels like. And then Kalsher was a good shooter, but who's going to get him the ball? I'm not sure who plays point guard for them.
Yeah, so. and with Indiana, I think a lot's going to depend on Jerome Hunter's health. A lot's going to depend on, how this team comes in. I am optimistic about Indiana. I've been saying for a long time, I think next year's team's going to be better than this past year's team was. That doesn't look like it's going to be enough to get. I mean, just being better than last year's team isn't going to be enough to get them into that next group in that top five. I think the way we thought it was. But you've got a lot to like about this incoming roster if everyone's healthy. And that's the huge thing for Indiana. They're in that top five if they're healthy, if they can find a way to get healthy and then just have everyone take that next step forward as they should year to year. So a lot on those coaches to keep guys healthy and make sure they take that next step forward, because if they do take that next step forward individually, then as a team, they should definitely move out of that question marks group. Absolutely. And move on to the next level, I think.
Yep. Yeah, I think Michigan becomes a little more clear once you figure out who the coach is and what kind of system it is. Wisconsin's an odd one. They definitely a question mark because, it's been so long since you've seen them without Hap. What do they really do? I think Nate Reavers played really well. I don't know that he is going to step into those shoes exactly as well. I think your should be better category is interesting. I would dispute that with Penn State, and maybe that's just because I have zero faith in Pat Chambers at this point.
They got their whole team back though. If Lamar Stevens comes back,
they lost Josh Reeves, right?
Oh, Reeves, that's right. They did lose Reeves, and he's an important player too.
I always struggle with that because I feel like we've done this song and dance with Penn State before, where they get guys back and then they don't actually do anything. So. I don't know about that one. The Rutgers and Illinois ones are definitely. I would definitely agree that they're going to improve. I've seen some people that are really high on Illinois because Georgie is back. DeSunmu decided to come back. I think they added a top 50 guy. Really didn't lose anyone of note, and I think seemed to, once they got away from pressing as much, seemed to fare a little bit better. And Rutgers, I think it's been a slow climb for them, but at least from an identity standpoint, defensively, what they are. They didn't really lose much of anything either. They got a grad transfer from Stony Brook, where Steve Peichel used to coach previous, that could give them a little bit more scoring. So
Michael's a good coach. It's just a question of whether or not he can get the players there.
Yeah. I mean, they found a way to win 7 Big Ten games last year. So if you told me they win a couple more this year, that wouldn't shock me, and get to close to 500. Like, that wouldn't shock me at all. I think they're just a difficult team to play against in some ways, and one that everybody is kind of conditioned to overlook, but maybe really shouldn't be. So I would probably parse those maybe a little bit differently, or push them potentially further up the pecking order and push Penn State down. And then I think the bottom few are.
Yeah, I didn't know what to do with them, because I think they'll be better. But it's like those teams and the ones in the question mark category.
It's too big of a jump to say they're in like the next tier. They'll pass probably a couple of those teams in the question marks, depending on how that shakes out. I think.
Yeah, and it's funny because with Peichel, a guy like Peichel, I actually have real faith in him because he has built a culture there, and that's a tough place to build culture. And if you put him in a place, let's say, for example, like with Illinois' resources and ability to bring in players. I mean, Illinois is getting some pretty good players under Underwood. If you put him in a place like Illinois with those resources, he might make a pretty good run there. It's just that he's at Rutgers, and there is always a ceiling to what kind of player you're going to get at Rutgers. And so it's interesting. I agree. I think they should be better. I think he's done a really nice job there. The question just is, where's the ceiling? And there's always a ceiling when you're at a program like that.
So let's peer out even more into the future. Let's talk the next 5 seasons. All right. And you guys might have seen this. I think the Big Ten Network put this out last offseason sometime. But they basically, and they talked with coaches, and they ranked all the Big Ten teams in terms of history and tradition, media exposure, game atmosphere, budget resources, recruiting-based facilities, and then admission requirements. And basically to try and figure out, like, what's the best job in the Big Ten. Indiana came out number 1. Even though the facilities were only 6th, the history, tradition, the media exposure, the game atmosphere, Indiana was 1, Michigan State was 2, Ohio State was 3, Michigan was 4, Maryland was 5, Purdue was 6, and on and on. The question I have for you guys is, which Big Ten teams do you think will win the most conference games over the next 5 seasons? Like, if you had to put some money on it, which ones do you have the most confidence in? And again, I think this is interesting to do now, because with Beeline leaving, it kind of changes this, because I think we all would have had Michigan up there a lot higher. So I will give you my top 5 real quick, and then Andy, you jump in, and then Ryan jump in. My top 5 was Michigan State, because I don't think Izzo's going anywhere for at least the next 5 years.
I think we all think that's number 1, right?
Yes.
We just
I would agree.
that out right now. Yeah.
I would have had Michigan second. I have Purdue second. I didn't want to, but it's hard to argue with. I mean, they have the second best coach in the conference right now, So, and a lot of times when you're ranking this, you're going on the faith that you have in the coach in addition to the overall program. I had Indiana 3rd, Ohio State 4th, and then Maryland 5th, which was a tough one, but Maryland just always seems to have players.
Got that Under Armour money. You can't downplay that.
Yeah, I mean, and town ends up winning. So it was really hard after that, and we'll get to it. But I felt relatively confident actually in the top 5, and then.
So wait, repeat your top 5. I'm sorry.
Michigan State, Purdue, Indiana, Ohio State, Maryland.
Okay.
So, thoughts?
I would say Michigan State for sure, number 1. I don't think that's a question. I think we all agree. I would put Purdue. For some reason, I know Greg Gard isn't Bo Ryan, but so I think he's going to be gone, and I think Wisconsin as a program could come back up. I wouldn't put them second. I'm just considering top 5. Second, yeah, probably Purdue if you're looking at it today.
And if you're trying to be objective, I mean, my heart says Indiana, and I think you could make an argument, but you're projecting a lot based on stuff we haven't seen. That's the difference.
Yeah, no, Indiana is in the top 5. I don't know where to put them. 3, 4. I think Ohio State's a good pick. because Ohio State's the kind of program where every year you look back at yearly records and you're like, really, they won that many games? They tend to win games, and no matter who the coach is, and so I would say Ohio State has to be in that top 5, and then I might put Wisconsin in that top 5 because I don't think Greg Gard's going to be there, and I think they're going to find somebody because it's a good program to coach at. And I think that they put enough resources into the basketball program and they get players to develop.
But for in a short time window, that would mean that Gard would have to have 2 pretty bad seasons. And
I think one more average season, he's gone. I do. I think one more average season and he's gone. There is a lot of discontent in Badger land right now. I think, didn't they give him an extension recently? And I heard that extension was because players thought he was going to leave. So he was having a tough time recruiting guys because they thought he was going to be gone. So there's a lot of whispers around that program that he's on his way out.
Well, I had Wisconsin 6th, and I had Nebraska 7th because I think Fred Hoiberg.
Oh, Hoiberg, yeah.
Yeah, I think he over the next 5 years.
I don't think he's there in 5 years. That's not where he wants to end up. I think he'll do well and leave.
I would agree with you. If he does well, he leaves. If he doesn't do well, he'll be there 5 years.
He already left his alma mater, albeit to go to the NBA. But I would say if a better college job opens up, I mean, to me, this is essentially a measure of program stability at this point. And I think that's why Purdue, for me, would be second, as you said, where you've kind of built a culture there that guys can run through, and it's always seemingly have a pipeline of other guys to come up. I think I would probably put Ohio State third for the same reason. I think Holtman has bought himself enough. With the way he's been the first couple of years, recruiting has started to get even better this year with the guys that he's brought in, and you've got a situation where you've got a lot of resources but not a ton of pressure, and we've seen Ohio State flourish in that situation in the past. So I would have them up there. Maryland's interesting. I think Turgeon is always one who's a little bit hot and runs a little hot and cold with the fan base at times. So is it a case where if they gradually have a couple losing seasons, people turn on him and he never gets them back? But I think in the short term between that and, kind of tongue in cheek, the Under Armour thing, but not a complete, just a throwaway statement either. I think they make sense up there. And I would like to think IU would be, but again, if you view this as a measure of stability and current trajectory of where these are going, I think IU might end up in the top 5 just because there's not really another clear choice. I don't know if that's necessarily because like the recent track record is really there to suggest it, as much as I don't really know who else you would put there. Maybe Michigan maintains their recent level of success, but that's definitely hard to answer based on the coaching, based on who they would actually pick. But
I mean, it's faith in the resources IU has and the recruiting base and the tradition and just the fact that, my God, they can't continue to be this up and down forever, right?
Well, yes, that feels like the right way to frame it.
Hey, you hire enough coaches, eventually you're going to hit on one,
I have to say, I'm so sick and tired of doing exercises like this and having Purdue come out on top of us. And I mean, really believing it, like they've earned it over what they've done the last 3, 4, 5 years. And that is, a good lesson in having faith in a coach, allowing a young coach to grow if you believe that he's a good coach, because Purdue's gone through up and downs, with Matt Painter. And who knows if Archie ends up being like that. I still have faith in him, but, Purdue's built themselves a good program, and it's, they're not just going to fall down because they lose a player. When Caleb Swanigan left, they thought they were going to take a step back, and they've continued to win. So it's something that's the place that we want Indiana to get to. And, hopefully Indiana is in the top 3 over the next 5 years, because that'll mean that we're playing a lot of meaningful games and hopefully making it back to the tournament. Any final thoughts on this, guys, before we wrap up and go to some questions?
Nope, I think that's it for me.
No.
Okay. No real outliers from your other rankings looking down here on the run sheet. Again, I like what Peichel's done at Rutgers, but again, it's a little bit hard to figure out who you're actually going to put them over. You really need the bottom to drop out of a couple others to really project them that much higher than they are.
Yep. All righty. Coming up in our third segment, we will answer your questions, which include one about Romeo Langford's draft stock in comparison to one former IU target in particular. That's kind of an interesting conversation. We will answer that question and more coming up here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. We'll be right back. All right. 1753. So we're at 39:06. We've got 10:54. So we got to be out at 10:18. There's some quick math for you.
That was
Nice job.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so which questions here do you want to hit? We'll do the Romeo one first. I think the answer is pretty obvious. But then we can do the scholarship one. Has Billy Donovan and Brad Stevens plane left Ann Arbor yet? My God. I mean, it's not going to happen, but the meltdown if either one of those guys was named Michigan's coach.
Dear
Which is
God.
Brad Stevens. I think Brad Stevens is never going back to college basketball. I've talked to people who are just like, he's so much happier. He hated recruiting,
and he could get, 20 other NBA jobs if he left Boston?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, he could sit if they fired him right now, he would not coach next year. He would sit out, and he would be the number one most in-demand coach.
Maybe his future is in Indiana, but it's with the Pacers.
Yeah, that's 100% possible. I could see that happening before I could see him coming to IU or going back to Butler or whatever.
Or going to Duke, which is the other one people talk about.
Yeah, he's not going to Duke. Coach K is picking one of his. Coach K is picking one of his guys to be the successor at Duke. It's going to be Wojo. He has worked that into his contract. I think it's slimy. It is. But if you don't fawn all over him, he pretty much ostracizes you. It's
He
true.
needs to get one of his proteges to actually develop a good track record. That would be
Wojo's
good.
been pretty good at Marquette. I mean, okay.
Yeah, he's been okay.
No, I agree. I mean, and it's not going to be like Mike Brey. Mike Brey's never leaving Notre Dame. So at least, I mean, yeah, I don't think he will.
That would seem like a weird one, just time in his career.
Yeah, it's like maybe 5 to 7 years ago he would have, but he's kind of set. Yeah, I think Stevens is going to stay in the NBA. People say he hated doing all of the stuff that a college coach has to do. He just couldn't stand it. And I don't know. I think he's set. Maybe he changes his mind in 10 years, but I don't see it right now.
A walking skeleton with a hairpiece.
I mean, let's be
Those are my
honest.
favorite ones.
It's true.
So many good ones.
Might be a little uncouth, but it's true.
So many good ones. Where the Hauser brothers going to go? That would be a big get for Greg Gard if they went to Wisconsin.
They were the Wisconsin was the favorite, but
I heard Virginia was thrown out there too.
that was the. It
I
was
could see
Virginia,
them
Virginia,
fitting well there.
Virginia and Wisconsin were the two favorites. Do they have to sit out though?
Yes.
Yeah, they
One of
both
them.
do.
Yeah, they both do.
I think they both do.
I
And
think they both do, yeah.
that's why everybody talked about it. It was so odd because Sam, I think, is the older one. Like
He has
gonna
1
be a
year left.
He's going to be a senior, but he's not a grad transfer. And the other one redshirted his freshman year, so he's just like giving up another year of eligibility unless they can get a waiver.
Yeah.
Who do they hate
Garrett-
more,
Garrett
Wojo or
Newton.
Marcus Howard? Because they clearly don't like one of the two of them.
Yeah, I
Or
don't
both.
I'm gonna. Well, maybe one because of the other would be my guess.
Yeah, my buddy Jeremy is furious. They're leaving. He has season tickets to Market Basketball. He's like,
Man, that sucks. Okay, let's do some
Oh,
questions.
did you? Oh, yeah. We never. I'm good with really any of the ones
Okay.
you want to.
they usually take
Let's hit 'em.
longer than we
Yeah,
all
no.
Definitely the first two, and then whatever others you want to hit that are out there are fine. But
Okay.
definitely the first two I think are the best ones, at least.
Okay. 10-16, what did I say?
Thought you
10-8,
said
10-18. 10-18. Okay. Here we go. Okay.
This is Nick Zeisloft. I never miss an open three, and I never miss an episode of The Assembly Call.
Thank you, Nick. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. Remember that you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup, even during the offseason, and after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. All right, guys, it's time for our mailbag. All of these questions were submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can learn more about at assemblycall.com/community. Here's a question from James. He says, obviously a lot can happen, but are you at all surprised by the fact that Darius Garland has so thoroughly passed Romeo on draft boards? If I remember correctly, Romeo came into college ranked higher, and Garland goes out with an injury very early in the season. Romeo did have struggles, but was a great player in one of the best leagues in the country with a torn ligament in his hand. I feel bad for him that his reward for playing through injuries is to fall significantly while Garland has been rising because there isn't any tape of him facing adversity at the college level. So that is true. Romeo was ranked higher than Garland. Now, if you look at not by much. I mean, Romeo was 5'6", Garland was like 9'10". If you look at mock drafts now, you typically see Garland going in the 4th or 5th spot. Romeo, I've seen him in kind of 13 to 17 in that
back end of the lottery,
Detroit Pacers type spot. Here's what I will say, Ryan, and you can agree or disagree with this. I think the reason why Garland is higher is his game right now. When you look at his skills, it more obviously projects to the NBA because he's an elite outside shooter. He's got a quick release. And, he's a little bit of an undersized point guard, but I think people look at him and they say, Damian Lillard. Like it's a little bit
guard-driven league.
Right. And it's a shooting-driven league. And the biggest question mark for Romeo is the shooting. I mean, if Romeo, shot consistently throughout the year, he would be a top 5, top 6 pick. And yes, he had the injury that probably affected the shooting some. We don't know how much, but that's still going to factor into it. And so I don't think it's as much that people didn't see Garland face adversity. It's they see him shoot and they see his point guard skills, and that more clearly translates to the modern NBA.
Yeah, and I think that there's a good way to look at this. It's like, how in the NFL draft, quarterbacks automatically vault to the top 5, regardless of where they rank in their ability versus other players, because quarterback is an important position. It's, so the best player in the draft this year may not have been Kyler Murray. It may have been the Bosa kid or Quinnen Williams or whoever. But Kyler Murray went number 1 because of the value of that position. I think it's the same thing with a point guard. It's not to the same degree as you do with a quarterback in football, but it's a point guard driven league. You have your point guard, you have your offense, you have the guy who's going to set the tone. And I think, in one of my mock draft projections a couple weeks ago before the lottery, I had him going number 4 to the Memphis Grizzlies because, he's from Tennessee, went to Vanderbilt, perfect fit, and take over from Mike Conley. So right now in my mock draft yesterday, I had him go into the Lakers at number 4. I think the Lakers are going to have a lot of turnover this offseason, but I think he and Lonzo Ball, I think their skill sets
he'd be lethal with Ball and LeBron. Holy moly.
Yeah. And so I think that a lot of people think Lakers are going to trade that, but I think it will be tough to pass that up. If he's healthy, he has a meniscus injury, he's kind of shutting him. He may not go through the draft process like a lot of other people will, because there are rumors that he got a draft promise from somebody up high. I think that a lot of it has to do with position, and Garland he's a scoring point guard, and in the league right now, if you have a scoring point guard, you're successful. Look at all the teams left in the postseason right now. They all have guards who can get to the rim and also shoot the ball. That's, I think, what it is. I do think there's something too. We saw Romeo play an entire season against better players than he played in high school. And there were times when he struggled. There were times when he was up and down. The shooting also is a concern. So I think all those factors are into it, but I do think that positional ability of Garland is a huge factor in why he's such a hot property right now.
To me, this is a miniature argument of when you get guys, should I go back to school or not? People got to see, for better or worse, they got to see a lot more Romeo, a lot more film to pick him apart. And Garland, they had 5 games, and he looked really good in those 5 games. It's not to say that if they played 25 more games after that, he would have looked any worse. But all everybody has to go on with him is that 5-game sample size and what they saw with him as a recruit. It's the same argument that you might give somebody to say, like, hey, should I go back to school? Most of the time, if it's a borderline case, they're going to be told no, because all it does is give people extra time to pick you apart. So not really to anyone's fault in this case. But people saw an extra 20 plus games of Romeo, gave them additional time to pick him apart. The flaws that people found in him became kind of exaggerated because those continued. And while we don't really know what role the injury played in it, you can't take back what people saw at this point, and you have to kind of go through and prove them wrong. Versus Garland kind of set it out there. Hey, I'm a great shooter. Was known as one in high school, did the same thing in a small sample size in college, and that perception persists out there in the world.
I've got something. Romeo, if you're going to fall to like 18 and you want to come back to Indiana, man, we will take you. Come on back, buddy.
We got 2 scholarships.
That's what I'm saying. There's open scholarships.
We'll give you both of them.
Take them both. I don't care. Set you up in a nice house on campus,
Okay. Let's.
No, I
right
mean
there.
with the extra scholarship money.
About to commit a violation here on radio.
But no, if you're gonna fall that far, dude, come back.
Okay, speaking of that, a good segue to Sally's questions. He says, we have 2 scholarships open for the 2019 class, correct? You guys said we will likely pick up a grad transfer, so that still leaves 1. Well, we hope. We'll see. So he says, is there a benefit to holding that? Can't we help one of the walk-ons for a year? She said, can you tell I have one in college and another one heading there soon? Just thinking it would be nice to help one of them pay some bills. But if there is a benefit to the program to not do that, then I get it. So we know, look, one of the benefits to holding a scholarship is that you don't maybe reach for a guy and get stuck with that guy for 4 years. You can bank it for next season. But she's asking, like, okay, we hold that scholarship, understanding that benefit, could you give it to VJ Blackman or somebody else? Is there any downside to doing that for a year and then having that scholarship then for another player after that? I don't often see that done. At least I haven't seen it done with Indiana. But
yeah, because it's hard to take somebody off scholarship once you put them on scholarship, and that's the thing. Is it if you're just giving a guy a scholarship for 1 year because you have it open, then taking it away after a year because you need that roster spot? I mean,
that just seems like something to communicate ahead of time. Like, hey, we have this scholarship.
And look, it's done sometimes, but. Doesn't IU guarantee 4-year scholarships now? So do they have to give a walk-on the scholarship for the rest of the time he's in college? I don't know how.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how with the student athlete bill rights. I don't know how that works. I know how it would work for a guy who was originally offered one, but the walk-on piece is a little bit.
I don't know if that
unique,
affects walk-ons as well. It would be nice to do that, but at the same time, if you are recruiting a guy and you could say, look, we have 2 guys leaving and we have these 2 other scholarships. We're looking to take a 4-person class. It's probably easier to recruit those extra guys if you can point at openings, that are coming, as opposed to like, well, we have this guy on scholarship, but we're going to take him off for you. And, I think we'd all like to add 1 more player for next year. I think that, if
some
they're
backcourt help,
if they're worthy of the scholarship, of course, a grad transfer or a recruit that maybe shakes loose from somewhere else or something. But at the same time, I see no problem in banking scholarships. I think that it's good to have the extra flexibility moving forward in case it balances the roster a little bit. And it, in case there's a class that comes where you can get several guys like Archie's class last year with a bunch of young guys that all wanted to come. So we'll see. But I think that if you can't find somebody you think is completely worthy of being on scholarship for 4 years, or a grad transfer for 1 year because you still have that scholarship open the next year, then I think you should bank.
Yep.
I think from a practical standpoint, it just turns into, do you have we saw last year with the number of guys that got hurt, trying to figure out how you actually have an effective and challenging practice, probably became pretty difficult over the course of the year. So that really, from a practical standpoint, is the only thing that may lead you to say, hey, I don't want to bank both of these to be able to get some. But I also, like I said at the beginning, I'm glad to see they're not just trying to give these out just to give them out because they have them. So we'll see how that all balances out. But I definitely don't know the behind the scenes, parameters of what you can and can't do in terms of giving them the walk-ons and then rescinding that at some point in the future.
All right, last question real quick, Ryan, from Mark. Has it turned out to be a mistake to focus so much effort on signing Keon? By the time he decided we were too far behind to get anyone else and are now short in this class, especially with the Jerome unknown situation. 15 seconds. What do you think?
No, I think that when you have a great player from the state of Indiana, you got to go after him. And I don't think Indiana expected to – I don't think Indiana was thinking, oh, we're definitely getting him. They were prepared for the eventuality, and they took the risk, and they realized, hey, it's a good player from Indiana. We want to get him. That's it. We're done. No more questions.
All righty, that is going to do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU basketball again with you next Thursday night. Until then,
take it from me, Jordan Halls. Keep your elbow in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
And cut. Thank you for that, Jordan. Okay. Good stuff, everybody.
All right. Managed to squeeze another 50 minutes out of an uneventful week. So.
Well, we talked Big Ten. We talked
At
Darius
least the
Garland.
Beeline
We talked
things
Ethan
did that.
Happ. We talked John Beeline. We talked Purdue.
So many of our favorites.
Beeline
Yeah.
We talked Game of Thrones. We squeezed a little IU basketball talk into this episode.
Yeah. Touch.
So can you call Christian on Cameo and get him to say that and get him to say that I wish my brother would go to IU? That would be a great cameo.
That would, but the shelf life of that one would not last very long.
Or then he could be like, I wish my brother would have picked Indiana.
Yeah. I've submitted one to Carson Edwards to do the I never listened to the assembly call because he's on there for like $20, but he's never responded to it. I've submitted it twice and he's
busy right now.
Yeah, I know. Thomas Bryant's on there. He hasn't responded, but otherwise McSwain's on there, Priller's on there, Newkirk. I've got all those guys. And then I've reached out to some guys individually that I think are going to do it. So we should have some more of those rolling in. It's just kind of nice to have those. I think it's a nice little
Are they like you've reached out to the guys individually off of Cameo?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, just on Twitter. I basically said like, hey, we saw Christian on Twitter and did this, and so if you want to do it too, we'll pay you for the clips and just to give us some promos. Like I think Verdell's going to do it. Jordan Hulls obviously did it.
You know what you should get Verdell doing? It's like, damn it, Jared. That's what you should do.
The damn it, Verdell.
Yeah, but do it for Jared. Like they can't all be about me. Let's be honest. We need to spread out the love a little bit.
No, I think the Ethan Happ one is the only one that's going to be about you.
Right. No, I know.
Perfect.
But
Snoop Dogg is on there for like $1,000. I thought it'd be kind of nice to have him do a little intro for us.
Yo, this is Snoop Dio Double Dizzle.
Oh my God.
No, that's what he would say. Come on.
That is not anything like it would sound.
I'm not trying to do an impression.
Uncanny. It was really.
All right. With that, I got to go get.
I had to look back up. I thought he was actually had hopped on and you just sent him the link.
Shut up, Andy. Please pull the shut up Andy drop. That would be great.
No, but I will be pulling the Snoop Dio Double Jizzle or whatever you just said.
Oh, no. I'm starving. I'm hungry. I gotta go.
Oh, Chad, yes, George Leach. Get George Leach. That'd be awesome.
Oh,
okay.
God, no.
We need to get Marco Killingsworth.
All right, I gotta go eat. Dinner's on the table. I'm starving.
Go eat. All right, everybody.
All right, we'll see you. We'll see you guys next week.
Oh, well, you won't see me. So you have it. Let's make sure Coach is there, and then Chad says he does know this is being recorded, right? We're never sure.
Yeah.
Never quite sure.
Will
so
this
wait,
be on
this
the
is
podcast?
going to be on the podcast? Yeah, there we go.
Oh, the podcast is off?
Yeah, so Coach should be good. And then I talked with Ben and Michael about having them on for one more show. So maybe we'll try and get Ben on to do some NBA draft type analysis, that kind of thing. Okay, so I'll see if you can hop on with us.
Okay.
All right, sweet, man. Thanks for taking it next week.
Hey, no problem.
All right, y'all.
Sounds good. See you guys next week. Later.